Hi, this is Julius Haryadi. I'm an internal medicine physician working in the US. In today's video, we are going to talk about visa options for non-US IMG. Now, please note again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a doctor, but I can share you my experience because I have gone multiple visas already. I've been on B1, B2 visa, I've been on F1 visa, I had F2 visa when my wife was F1, I have J1 visa, and at that time, my wife is J2 visa. I have gone through the J1 waiver process, and then I had the H1B visa, and then my wife is H4 at that time, and then now I'm green card. So I've gone through all these multiple visa process and quite familiar about it. I think way more familiar than a lot of non-US IMGs out there. So I think I'm credible enough to explain and share this experience and some basic information about the visa for you. But of course, again, because I'm not a lawyer, I have invited a lawyer. I have an immigration lawyer that's willing to collab a video with me. He is an immigration lawyer that has 20 plus years experience. He located in New York, and just have found to connect with him, and he agreed to do a session with me, collaboration, and it's going to be a live session. Yes, it's going to be a live session, so you can ask questions live, and it's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. I have a link down description below, and you can click that if you want to join with the live session and ask questions, get a lot of value, everything about the visa. I would highly recommend you to join. In such, we're going to have a lot of discussion as well, especially during the Trump administration. There will be a lot of major changes actually going on. There is a J1 updated skill list that happened back in December 2024 and what it actually means for us non-US IMG. So we're going to discuss a lot of things. It's going to be a very valuable session. And it's free. It's free. Just click the link down description below and then sign up if you want to join the live session. But for now, I will explain to you the basic information about all these different visa. So today we're going to talk about B1, B2 visa, F1 visa, J1 visa, H1B visa. I'm going to explain a little bit about the difference between the J2 and H4 because there is a difference. And I'm not going to explain about the J1 waiver process because I already created the video that explained about J1 waiver process. You can take a look at the link down in the description below. You can watch it later. Explain about if you choose the wrong J1 waiver program, it can cost you $250,000, and it's true. And I think it's important for you to watch that video and understand it if you're going for the J1. I also create a video, some changes that happened during the Trump administration when I was back as a resident. You can watch that in the other video as well. So let's get started. Now, this is the way I'm going to do this. I'm going to just provide you the main information about this visa. What is this visa all about? The original purpose of this visa. I'm going to explain the pro and cons for each visa. So just really the main thing that you really need to know. Okay, let's start with the B1, B2 visa. So the B1, B2 visa purpose is basically for business or tourism. Actually, B1, B2 is very flexible. You can use that for anything because saying that you have some business purpose in the US is very broad. For example, you can say, well, most non-US IMG gonna say, I have a clinical rotations in the US. You can use that. That's a business purpose. Or you actually have a business meeting that's legit. You can use that one as well. If you actually plan for a vacation, you can use that as well. If you plan to scout college for a future study, you can use that. Or if you are going to compete in an Evolution Champions in Las Vegas every year, it's a big fighting game tournament, you can use the B1, B2 visa as well. There's a broad purpose of business that you can do in the US. So that would be one of the benefits because it's very broad. Now, the important thing about this B1, B2 visa is the fact that you can only typically grant it of 6 months stay once you enter the US. Now, this could be a benefit, this could be a drawback. So for example, if you need to do research and the research going to last for more than 6 months, then it will be very difficult. You have to apply for some form of extension. Maybe the extension can last for another 6 months, so it could be up to a year, but there's no guarantee that it will be approved. And then after that, there is no grace period. And there is no grace period on the 6 months either if you don't do the extension. So if it's time for you to go home, you need to go home. Although if you apply for extension, you can stay as long as the application process is still going on, so you can stay. That could be kind of serve as your grace period. You can say it that way, but typically there is no grace period on the main rule. So it's time for you to go home, you have to go home. And I explained to you here in my other video, immigration policies, that every IMG needs to know that you cannot overstay, not even a day, not even an hour, not even a millisecond. You do not want to overstay. So that is the issue of this visa. You can see it as a downside again, but the benefit is you just straight got the 6 months most of the time. Another benefit of the B1 B2 visa is the flexibility of your stay. So in F1 visa, you are required to attend 20 hours study on the location where you apply to. Here, you don't have that, so you can do anything you want. You can do that clinical rotations, you can do your step 3, you can do really whatever. So it becomes very flexible stay for you when you're staying in the US. So that's the B1 B2 visa. Let's move on to the F1 visa. The F1 visa purpose is for study. It's your study visa. It's the student visa. You have to be accepted by a school in the US in order for you to get an F1 visa. The school will grant you a form called the I-20 form. The I-20 form will state how much money you need and the duration of stay as well. If your study program lasts for 6 months, then the 6 months is your duration of stay. If the program study is 1 year, then it's 1 year. So it really depends. The benefit of F1 visa is actually you can stay as long as the I-20 live. So you can always transfer school, and that's what I did. I went to the US, to New York, as an F1 student in Kaplan Center. And then after the program is finished, after my USMLE is finished, in order for me to stay in the US legally, I need to transfer school. The new school will grant you another I-20 form with a new duration of stay. And then you can stay as long as the I-20, again, live. And then you can actually keep doing that. So that is the benefit of F1 compared to B1, B2. In B1, B2, you have 6 months, extend for a year, and then you're done. You cannot, you can choose to go back to your home country for a day and then come back to US, but you'll be frowned upon. You're probably going to decline entry to the US, you see. So, but the extreme side, there is no clear X duration of months, how long you need to stay in your home country before you come back to the US. Typically, though, if you want to be safe, you have to stay as long as you stayed in the US. So, for example, if you stayed in the US for 3 months, then at least you want to stay in your home country about 3 months before you come back to the US. If you stay for a year, then at least you're going to stay for about a year, I would suppose. If you stay for 3 months, then come back to the US, you put some more risk in that, you see. Now, that is the problem with the B1, B2. F1, where you don't have that problem, you can keep extending, you can keep transferring school, and you will have your I-20. As long as you keep that I-20 alive, you can stay in the US legally. The downside is, because you have to stay for 20 hours a week in that study location, your stay in the US becomes less flexible. You see, what if you need to go for clinical rotations for, let's say, 4 weeks? It will be very difficult. So that is the problem with the F1. Now, you can overcome this by using the grace period. There is a grace period in F1, some kind of vacation or some sort, and you can use that to do whatever you need to do. So that is the F1 visa. So those are the two typical visa that you're going to use to enter the US before the residency. When you match and get the residency, you have two options, which is the J1 visa and the H1B visa. I'm going to talk about the main differences between the two. So the J1 visa, the main benefit is it's easier to get fellowship. The reason is because a lot of fellowship programs offer J1 but not H1B. J1 is easier to get fellowship. The J1 has a lot of drawbacks. First, if you are part of the skill list that listed by the US Embassy, then you are subject to the 2-year home requirement program. So that means you have to go home for 2 years before you can come back to the US. Now you can waive this by doing the waiver process for 3 years. Now, here's the thing. Because of the updated skill list, there are countries that does not have to do the waiver, or I would say it's not subject to the 2-year home requirement. I can put the link in the description below to provide you what are the countries that is now part of the skill list and no longer part of the skill list. But because a lot of viewers here is from India, Pakistan, Nepal, I can say that India and Pakistan is outside of skill list now. Now, does that mean that if I go to residency, if I'm Indian or if I'm from Pakistan, if I do the residency in the US as a J1, I don't have to do waiver? No, because there's an exception. The graduated medical education and government-funded program are exception to this rule. That means doesn't matter where you're coming from. If you go to a government-funded program or you are graduate medical education, which is residency, you are subjected to the 2-year home requirement and you have to do the waiver if you want to stay in the US. There is no way around it. But if you are the J1 researcher, then it's not graduate medical program. Well, it could be government funded, so you just have to avoid that if you're a J1 researcher. And then you're not subject to the 2-year home requirement. That is the new thing that happens recently. Coming back to the J1 downside, if you are subject to the 2-year home requirement program and need to do the waiver, then doing the waiver means that you're competing with slots. And I explained this in J1 Waiver Physician. I would highly recommend you to watch that video because I explained about the Conrad 30 and other types of J1 waiver programs. You understand it from that. But basically, you have to compete with a limited slot. And then another downside is that you have to go to suburban or rural area, which could be a downside if you don't like it. It might not be a downside if you enjoy living in a suburban or rural area. So that really depends. Now we move on to the H-1B visa. The H-1B visa is not a work type of visa, but this one does not have the 2-year home requirement. The only downside of H-1B is that it's harder for you to get fellowship. But again, you can just choose from H-1B to become a J1 if you want to. Once you're on J1, you're locked, except you are the J1 research one and you're not part of the skill list. But J1 typically you lock and you just cannot go around the 2-year home requirement except you do a waiver. So H-1B is way more flexible. So I typically recommend people to go for H-1B if you go for a residency program. And H-1B has all the benefits that the J-1 doesn't have, which is you can choose to work anywhere once you graduated from the residency program. And during the residency, you can do a moonlight if there is a moonlighting opportunities inside your program. H-1B is restricted in the particular employer. So you can only get the salary from that particular employer. You cannot get salary from anywhere else. So the moonlighting opportunities must be related to that particular program or health institution. Those are all the basic visas. Now I would like to touch a little bit about the EB visa. So this visa is the one that I'm least familiar with because I've never used this visa before, but I think it's important for me to at least mention it, at least you know about it, because it's one of the visa options that non-US IMG has. EB visa is a visa that is granted for people who has extraordinary ability. In this case, the one that's really related to non-US IMG would be research. So if you do a lot of research publications, you might have a chance to apply the EB2 visa. Although what you need here is a proof that your research or what you're doing is really contributing to the benefits of America, and you need somebody to vouch for you and said that the things that you are doing really contribute to the benefit of America, that you have to stay, that you should be granted a visa or a green card. The process to the green card from the EB visa is way much faster than any other visa. Although if you're coming from a country like India or China where there's a lot of backlog, then you're still going to take you years until you get your green card. The only way to bypass this is to marry a US citizen. Because if you marry a US citizen, you basically go into a completely different line for your green card process. Like people who's going through the J1 or H1B going to use this line, which is a backlog limited by countries. But once you marry a US citizen, you go to a completely different line, and that line is way empty and make it way faster for you to get green card. That is the only way that I know, order for you to bypass that limited by country requirement. Now, the last thing I want to mention before we go to the Q&A and answering questions in my LinkedIn post and an email is the difference between the J2 and the H4. So the difference is J2 can apply for work permit. Yes, you can apply for work permit, and that is one way for you to be able to accept that in a residency program. You can be on J2, and then because of the work permit, you are allowed to receive salary. The good thing about the J2 is also because of the work permit, you're allowed to have a YouTube channel and monetize from basically any kind of job. Because you have a work permit, you're allowed to work in US, and you're not limited in one employer only because it's a work permit. So J2 is very, very flexible. J2 probably the only way for you having a visa and able to have a YouTube channel. Well, I mean, any F1 or B1, B2 can try to apply for work permit, but good luck with that. But in J2, you're allowed to apply for that work permit, and most likely you're going to get approved. Now, the difference is when you go to H4, you're not allowed to have that work permit anymore. So if you were on J2 and have a work permit and you switch to H4 or H1, then that's lost. Then you're not allowed to monetize your YouTube channel again. Put it that way. So now we have talked everything about the visa. Now it's time for the Q&A. I'm going to answer the question about visa that comes from my LinkedIn post and my email one by one to the best of my knowledge. Again, I'm quite confident that I give the correct and accurate answer, and that is the reason why I'm making this video today. In case if there is some inaccuracy or something that not as accurate, there will be some clarification down in the description below with the help of my immigration lawyer. So let's get started. Okay, this is the first question. I have doubt for a long time. I run YouTube channel. I wish to pursue that in the future. So once I start working in the US, how to legally monetize my content that I make in US, since I'll be working on an H-1B visa, most probably. The answer is there is no way that you can monetize YouTube channel when you're on H-1B or on J-1 or F-1 or on B-1, B-2 visa. I can't find any legit way to monetize it. I think if you get a work permit, that's probably one way to do it. The other way would be a J-2 visa. But if you're on a J-1, H-1B, your income is very restricted. It has to come from that particular program only, or that particular employer only. So there is no way to monetize it if you use those visa. Let's say I do a year research in the States with J-1 visa. When I match to residency, can I switch to H-1B? Given the updated skill list, if your country is not part of the skill list, then yes, you will be able to transition. But if you're part of the skill list, then it's locked and you will not be able to transition. You will always be subjected to that 2-year home requirement. Can I do research with B1, B2? Yes, you'll be able to do that, but it would definitely be an unpaid research position. In addition, you'll be limited to that 6 months duration of stay. You can extend it for another 6 months, and there is no guarantee that will be approved, but that's about it. Then after that, you have to go home for a certain period of time. It will be, again, risky if you stay only for 1-2 months in your home country and come back for another year. That you'll be frowned upon and probably will decline entry to the US. Can we any chance get a green card before joining residency? There are a couple ways to get green card before joining residency. Marry a US citizen, that's probably the fastest way. You can get that EB visa, like I mentioned, but that is quite difficult to do. Those are the ways that I can think of. I can't really think of any other special way. Maybe my lawyer can mention any specific way, but so far, I think those are the 2 ways that you can get it. If my program only gives J1 visa, how could I switch it to H1 visa during my residency? The answer is impossible. There is no way to switch it, especially in the residency program. It's a graduated medical education, and doesn't matter which country you're coming from, you will always be subjected to the 2-year home residency. Again, as I said, the J1 cannot become H1B. It's law. H1B, though, can become a J1. So that's why that would be my preferred visa if you go through a residency program. What is the procedure to change F2 dependent visa to J1 status? Does having F2 status have any effect on J1 visa processing? This is actually what I did. I was an F2 and then I switched to J1. There is no fancy way to do it. The thing is, when you enter residency program, when you match, you are inside the whole system. They'll vouch for you. Somebody already pick you, wants you inside their program. And every program have their own lawyer. So I work with my lawyer. We go back and forth messaging through the email. Please note that the program will cover all the expenses related to the communication with the lawyer. Every time you send an email to the lawyer, they actually charge you. But the program will cover it, so you can basically go back and forth emailing and have explanation. They will guide you, so you don't have to worry about it. There is really nothing specific. I just go back home in my country and then switch my visa from F2 to a J1. My question is, how can you bring your spouse, non-doctor US, after you get residency in some US hospital? What's the procedure? What are the requirements? What's the tentative time for that? If you're J1, your spouse will be J2. If you are H1, your spouse will be H4. Again, when you go to residency, enter the system, there is going to be a lawyer that will help you. And that's what happened with my wife. When I switched from F2 to J1, my wife switched from F1 to J2. As long as you never violate the rules. The issue when I had doing my embassy was because my wife didn't go for the USMLE, even though she went for Kaplan. There is no completion of the program itself. You should receive some form of certification, or you pass the college. There is some form of the fact that you have complete your class. So things like that are actually very, very important. But Kaplan doesn't really have that, because the outcome of that is the USMLE scores, which my wife doesn't have. So it doesn't seem like she completed the program, and that could be an issue. But I was quite lucky. I don't know what happened. I think because of the letter that come from the ECFMG about me being accepted in the program. I remember that was the moment when the immigration officer kind of have changed in his face expression a little bit changed, and then he just approved it immediately. So the ECFMG letter, the fact that you are approved to a program as a doctor, is actually really powerful. I'm a Sudanese medical graduate, recently passed step 1, currently residing in Egypt, seeking applied B1, B2 visa observership in US due to ongoing conflict in my home country. Obtaining the visa has been challenging. Many of my friends in similar situation have had their visa application denied. Could you offer any advice on how I might improve my chances of obtaining the visa? Should I try to get the visa from a European country instead, or is it better to apply for J1 visa through research opportunities? Well, look, the key of proving B1, B2 is always the same, is going to be the strong ties to your country. If there is an ongoing conflict, of course, the embassy would worry that you probably flee your country and going to stay in the US. You have to provide a strong reasons why you will definitely come back to your home country. I know you're residing in Egypt, so you probably have to go back to Sudan. This is probably the reason why they reject the visa. They have a strong worry that you will not come back to Sudan because of, the ongoing conflict, and you probably apply for asylum. They don't want that. So that is the issue. And I understand that it's going to be very hard to overcome this issue here. You just have to provide the super, super strong ties why you're going to come back to Sudan where there is a conflict present. Hope that answered the question. An IMG starting fellowship via alternate pathway, can they simultaneously file for EB2 and NIW pathway while on J1, especially when the IMG is a specialist home country with good number of publication as well? Well, if you're talking about the J1 research, then yes, you can apply for EB2 national interest waiver. If you are not part of the skill list country, then you'll be able to do that. If not, then you are pretty much locked there. I'm most concerned about B1, B2 visa. I like to get more information about the pros and cons of both the J1 visa and H1B, which I already explained. I also would like to know if it's better to apply for the B1, B2 visa on the premise of doing the step 3 rather than just saying it's USC. I would also like to know tips on visa interview process for the B1, B2 visa. So this is quite a difficult question. Which one is better to have a reason to come to the US? USMLE step 3 or USCE? I am leaning toward the USCE if the USCE that you're going to do is actually a clinical rotation in a very prestigious program, academic type of university or hospital. Like, for example, a Cleveland Clinic. Cleveland Clinic provides international observership program for students. They are very legit established healthcare system in the US. And if you receive a letter of invitation from them and there is a clear reassurance that you're going to come back to your home country after this, then I would say that would be way stronger proof compared to just a USMLE step 3. That is kind of like my feeling. I will have my immigration lawyer to confirm about this. And again, I'm going to put extra information in the description below if there is any changes, but that's what I feel. And the other question is, what is the tips of doing the interview in the B1, B2 visa? Just the same thing. You have to prove that you have enough money when you stay in the US. You have to prove clear reasons of why you want to come to the US, and you have a clear, strong ties to your home country. Those are really just the key. The stronger the proof or the evidence are, the more likely you're going to succeed. Which visa is required for clinical observership? And also, if I don't have any connection in the US, would I get visa ever? I heard it's very hard without any connections. So you can use B2, 1B2, you can use F1, you can use any visa to come as long as you enter the country legally. It doesn't matter. But there is a downside, right? If you are on F1, then you need to attend a 20-hour study work in your location. If you are on a B1, B2 visa, then you can do whatever you want, but you only have 6 months, and there is typically no grace period. So you can do either one. And do you actually need any connections in the US? Well, it's not about connections. Again, it's about proving that you're going to come back to your home country and you have enough money. I would appreciate if you could answer, what if a spouse on J2 wants to do residency, then what are the options? I would say the J2, again, is one of the very flexible visa. The J2 can apply for an EAD, which is some kind of a work permit. So I would say the J2 just need to apply for the work permit, and then after that, they can work as a resident. And it's legal to actually receive money then, right? And on top of that, the J2 can make a YouTube channel. Taiwanese medical student really interested in US immigration. And the question is, he makes some publications here. I assume it's a he. Publication, Asia conferences, etc. Do I have a chance for a green card? What can I do to get a green card? What is my best option? So again, routes to get a green card would be marry a US citizen. That's the fastest one. You can go to the typical route like me, J1, Waiver, H1B green card, or H1B and green card. Given that he's coming from Taiwan, it's gonna be long list. It's gonna take many years until he can actually become a US citizen. A green card. That's the way to do it. Another way to do it is the EB visa, which my guess is he is referring to get the EB visa. Again, the EB visa is quite tricky to get. You need to show that you benefit the US in some way. Somebody needs to vouch for you saying the same thing. So you really need to come to the US and do that research, etc. And then have good connections, and then somebody can like vouch for you for applying for the EB2 national interest waiver. If I can get a visa at present, when can I get one in the future after I do my US residency? Not sure with the question here. If you can't get a visa right now, it's impossible for you pretty much to go for the US for residency. The reason is because you have to do the US clinical rotation, some form of observership, some form of hands-on electives, things like that, in order for you to be able to compete with the other graduates. And so you need a visa to enter the US. You need some form of visa being accepted, either that B1, B2, or F1 typically. So there is no way you can, I found it's very, very difficult to just jump directly to the US, match in the US residency program without having any US clinical rotation at all. I don't think you have a good chance to do that. It's very, very, very unlikely. So it's an impossible way to not have a visa and then able to match. Will the students who go on student visa will actually get a direct green card? If yes, then when will they get it? Like after a year staying there, directly after shifting to US? Like how will this entire thing work? So if you're on student visa, you can get a green card directly from there, except you marry US citizen and you the usual route, which I already explained, through the J1 visa and then a waiver H1B or H1B green card, or the EB2 visa. There are two last questions. If I have a B1, B2 visa, also somehow secure a research position, which I'm looking at the moment, that what are the things I will have to do, might face in that scenario. The things that you have to face is the duration of stay. You can only have 6 months and extend to a year, and that's about it. If I've shown that I'm going to observership in March 2025 during visa interview but ended up going in May 2025, in this situation, does the immigration department raise a query and refuse my entry in May as it differs from date of my visa letter? So I believe this is one of the students that going for observership with me. There is some change in the date. If the visa is already approved, then mean you have a right to, not rights, but you have a way to enter the US because you already have the visa. So I think the best way to approach here is to be honest that the dates change. I would give you my letter of invitation and mention that there is a change of the date because of certain issue that you may have, right? And then the dates will change. Date changes all the time. It's not surprising as long as you stay honest about it. And then there is an updated letter that's stating that yes, I still accept you to rotate in my office. So those are all the questions. I think I answered it quite accurately to the best of my knowledge. Again, there will be clarification down in the description below. We're going to have a real session with the immigration lawyer in the next couple of weeks. Use the link description below if you want to sign up and then go for the live session. There's just a bunch of free gifts down there that you can just grab it. I have USMLE Test Taking Strategies online course that is free, and I also have the USCE Essentials, which explain to you about the US clinical rotations, how to get one, the quote, email, etc., including 30 plus hospital lists that offer observerships or rotations for non-US IMG. So that is the video for today. I hope you find it helpful. Please click like and subscribe if you do, and I'll see you again in the next video real soon.